But then moving a little bit further, I liked what Paddy did around the way he rearranged the SDGs into dignity, people, planet, prosperity, justice, and I'm sure I forgot one, partnership, I think. And it's a very smart way around organizing our thinking of the narrative. In the research world, I heard what he said about scientists. But since he was invited here by us, it was impolite to point out that he was wrong. I mean, we all know that scientists adhere completely to the principle of objectivity. We're the most polite people we know, and this is true because we don't know many people, we only know each other. So we're in a safe place. But for the sake of science, the thing that scientists generally do is indulge a lot in simplicity. And then when we have to talk to other people, we make it really complex, because what if everyone knew how easy science was, eh? So here's an example of that simplicity. So what I've done here is I've taken several of the core MDGs. When I say core, I'm talking about the basic needs-oriented ones as opposed to the ones that organize for the supporting environment. So you're talking about the zero hunger, the nutritional security, you're talking about health, education, water, energy, etc. And reconceptualized it into a different frame around deriving a research agenda. It's a frame that you're familiar with because we have discussed this many times in a very different context, but now a little bit expanded. This is the frame. The frame is the nexus. So what we're talking about here is the first frame nexus is the water, energy, food nexus. This is something we've been having a vibrant international discussion about for a little while. The center of which is, if you like, the ultimate indicator around how these ones work, and that is what is the status of health in the system, because it includes the issues of nutritional security and well-being, etc., as well as the issues of education. And we're locating this within the context of the land discussion, because this is a critically important discussion globally, and we're vying for a lower carbon economy. So if there was a framework we should be looking at for research institutions, this is probably the beginning of that. And it's a very important framework for three reasons. The first reason is that it is a framework that has a very high inclusivity of the 17 goals of the SDGs. Crucially important. The second important reason is that it demands an interconnectivity. It insists that you can't do any one of those on its own without very important contributions from many of the rest. It requires that harmony to happen. And the third reason, and this is a really important reason, is that individually we have representation in the South African public R&D space of all of that already. So in the Science Council environment, beyond the Science Council environment, into the universities, even into the private sector environment around R&D, we have at least a start in all of those areas. And in some of those areas, well, we do really well as a country. I mean, you will know that in the health domain, for example, in the immunology domain, South Africa actually ranks in the top 10 in the ISI Field Rankings Index, which is phenomenal. In water, we rank 18th in the world, which is unbelievable, given that our total water science and technology community is no more than 2,500 people. So we have good starts in many of those areas. So my contribution to this discussion is that this is something we should expand and organize an in-depth analysis of how we can segment the work of the different public research institutions to have that compilation associated with this. In addition to that, of course, we have the overall and overarching issues associated with data. Paddy emphasized that in his presentation. I'm fairly sure in the presentations and the discussions you had yesterday, you'd have talked a lot about this. We don't only want to organize for a monitoring environment to help us with the SDGs. We want to use the SDGs to get the monitoring and evaluation environment that we need for everything else that we want to do. It's not easy. It is very difficult. I mean, in a couple of weeks from now, we will be having the seminar, the NACI seminar on the STI indicators. And we're steadily making progress around that, in particular around the bridge between the science and technology world and the real economy. We need to do a lot more of that. And we need to do a lot more of that really rapidly. So colleagues, this contribution is about a frame within which we need to do that thinking. But we also have to be cognizant of this, that we're not going to be able to achieve a level of high resource security in the world, whether we're talking about water or energy or nutritional security or health security or any of those associated with the 17 SDGs, if we are going to be resource wasteful, and we are as a country. To give you a water statistic, we are the 30th driest country in the world. We have been so for at least 1 million years, in case you want to go back to a nostalgic time. Okay. The world's average use for water, that's total use, per capita is 177 liters per person per day. Water-wise countries like Denmark, who have a higher level of water security than we do, are now at 108 liters per person per day. Would you like to venture a guess as to what the South African number is, as the 30th driest country in the world? Yes, you can shout out loud, it's allowed. It's 235. We use 235 liters of water per person per day. It's hugely wasteful. And if we reflect this back to every other sector, we'll find very similar statistics. So moving from resource wasteful behavior to resource wise behavior is something we have to do. And the second part, of course, is we can't use linear supply strategies. Whether we're talking about water or energy or food production or anything else, the old ways of doing things along a linear chain do not work anymore. You're not in the market anymore. You cannot produce the numbers that are required anymore. You can't organize for the drought resistance that you have anymore. You have to be innovative. That is the only way. The target is the purple dot. The purple dot says that you are in an innovation strategy around your production and your demand management is working just right. If you manage to do that, then you're in the SDG game. If you're not, well, you're in trouble. And here's some examples. I'm giving examples from the water world because I know more about that than a few other things. And one of the big initiatives that South Africa should be proud of, because we launched a global initiative around that. What you see there is Minister Mokanyane doing the keynote address in the Fecal Sludge Management Conference in Chennai in February this year, which was the biggest sanitation conference. The central messaging is this, is that it is possible to organize to meet the SDG goals around sanitation because it only requires an improvement. It says that whatever you have something better. We can make better things. And we still won't be able to give people safe and dignified sanitation. If you want to go the whole hog, you've got to be really smart about it. You are looking at a water scarce world. You are sitting in a world where the gold standard for sanitation is using 6 liters of drinking quality water. You do this every day. 6 liters of drinking quality water to move less than 200 grams of waste 1 meter into a sewage system. This is what we do. It's 30% of the water use in our households. We have to end that madness. And we end that madness by introducing sanity, of course, because that's a good way to end madness. And sanity stands for the Sanitation Transformation Initiative. So we have to organize for ourselves to have robust, new, smart ways of doing things. And stuff that is happening right in South Africa, coming out of our public research institutes, is stuff like this. Now, we have a whole range of tools around pore flush systems, pore flush combined biodigester solutions for water, sanitation, and energy inside that nexus and so forth. And we're doing some really leading work in the world. But I want to talk about this thing here, which is a little bit smarter. Because there is a convenience around the design of the current loo that you use. Maybe there'll be a convenience around a new one completely in time. But we've gone back to some of the fundamentals, because one of the things that we're losing when we're talking about the SDGs is the role of the basic sciences. We're working under the assumption that what we need to know is known. We just need to adapt it in the right kind of way and organize for an applied science intervention so we can get it out into the right kind of technology to go to the market. Well, in many cases that's true, but in some cases going back to the fundamentals of science is where the solution actually is. And here's the example. This is a thing called the arum loo, and it's named after this thing called the arum lily. Now, as South Africans, you should be both proud of the arum lily as well as ashamed of it. You should be proud because it's a really beautiful flower. You should be ashamed because it is a best-selling flower in the world in the fresh flower market, except we're not selling it. Australia is selling it. This is another example of exporting South African IP. But the thing around the fundamental science around this thing is that this device flushes with no more than 500 milliliters of water. And the reason it is able to is because it went back to the fundamental science to see how water moves in nature. Now, in nature, water does not move in a straight line, right? When water falls in a vessel, it goes in a vortex. Well, this is the first vortex toilet in the world. The reason why it only needs a half a liter of water is it spins around in a vortex because of some very special IP designs that I can't share with you. And that organizes for this to be able to have a half a liter flush. This maybe is what the future of the world actually looks like. It's not just about VIPs. There are nothing wrong with VIPs because we have solutions around how to deal with the sludge nowadays. But it's also about organizing for this to be the future of how we're looking at the world. And then we have to come back to this point because this is a very important point. That we often don't make these connections. That the world of research is fundamental in organizing to look at, well, the common term is triple challenge, but what scientists will appreciate that it actually is a cubed challenge because there's a multiplier effect on this. And the cubed challenge of poverty, unemployment, and inequality all over the world, no longer restricted to the developing world, I should point out to you. Poverty, unemployment, and inequality in the developed world is a very real phenomenon. Some of the poorest people on earth now live in the Midwestern states of the United States. So it's a changing world very rapidly. Now, research and the knowledge derived from research organize for the knowledge solutions that can help to bring people out of poverty. We know this. We have good examples in the world in this. I mean, the Chinese Spark program, which is the technology development program, organized itself to be the central pillar that had China move now more than 300 million people from poverty into the lower middle classes. It wasn't on the basis of subsidies. It wasn't on the basis of grants. It was on the basis of science providing the means for people to develop little businesses, which became big businesses, and had the ability to employ other people. The second thing is that increasingly, we need to be using our research base, and Valerie was with you yesterday, so I'm sure she spoke a lot about this, around providing that research base for enterprise and business development to deal with the unemployment issues in our system. Absolutely crucial. And then we live in a world of social barriers. We live in a country of social barriers. And increased knowledge is what organizes for us to remove those barriers so that we can deal with the issues of inequality in our system more robustly and more structurally. And these three issues are critically important because this cube challenge is in fact the center challenge of the SDGs. If the SDGs needed to do something, it needed to deal with this. But I said before that we need to be thinking beyond these milestones. And beyond this milestone is something even better. Because the other side of this coin is this, that if you organize for research to be sufficiently robust and sufficiently successful in dealing with unemployment and inequality and poverty in your environment, this is what is possible. It's growth and competitiveness and prosperity, and this is where we want to be. And we also have to recognize that in the way we're dealing with this, we're organizing for a future world that needs a very different skills base from the current, but we also need many more practitioners than we've ever had before. You know, while we were talking about tens of thousands 20 years ago, and we're talking about hundreds of thousands, now we're going to be talking about millions and hundreds of millions going into the future. This is the reality. And the HCD pipeline does not stop at the first cog of the certification. And this seems to be the current obsession with the HRD discussions, that if you just certify paraprofessionals, then you'll get many more people out into the field that will be able to do the job today. Yes, that is true. But they will only be able to do the job of today. They won't be able to do the job of tomorrow. In order to do that, you need to keep climbing along this pipeline. The certification comes from the diplomates who are able to teach you, who are then in turn taught by the graduates, who are taught by the postgraduates, and then that entire stream. So the business of research isn't only about producing the new solutions and the new platforms around those new solutions. It is also around the ability to train for the future in a much more robust way.